This is literally everything you need to know about using forms inside of Monday.com. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link below. We would love to help. As you can see here, I'm inside of our example Monday.com system. Now, in order to firstly get access to forms within Monday.com, you need to be on a board. It doesn't matter what board, you just need to be on a board. And then you need to go ahead and press the plus button on a view within a board. So it's up the top left-hand corner here. We are then looking for the form function. If you're unable to see it in your board views, just go to explore more views and just search for form and go ahead and press open in board. This will populate the standard form setup within Monday.com, and I'm going to walk you through everything that you need to know about how to use it, including conditional logic and everything else. To start with, you can see here we've got a welcome page up the top. You can turn this on or off. It's entirely up to you. Essentially, when you send the form to someone, as opposed to it going straight to the questions that we will have set up below, it will actually just take them to the welcome page where they press the start button text or the start button, and you can define the text. So begin survey, as an example, and they click the button begin survey. That takes them to the questions, which is the next step. You can choose to have this on or off. It's entirely up to you. The next thing that you might want to look at is adding a logo. You can go ahead and upload a logo to your form if you would like to. I'll come on to more of the design settings as we go through, and we can also name our form. So please complete our survey. You can name this whatever you like. You can also add a description as well. So if you'd like to include additional information about this particular form when they're completing it, very easy to do so. You can also, as you can see here, use bold, italic, underline. You can bullet point, number point. You can add a link and even emojis. So you've got plenty of options here. Now, the next thing you're going to notice is all of the questions or all of the data points. Now, these data points will match what you have on your main table or the main table for that particular board, okay? If I then head back to the form, you'll notice that there's a show hidden content button right in the bottom left-hand corner here. Untick this or tick this. So if you want to show the hidden content, and I'll explain what hidden content means in a moment, but if you can't find some columns that are on your main table but they're not visible on here, this might be why, this sneaky little button. So just check out for that. Make sure that show hidden content is on. Then we have our questions. Now, ultimately, our questions, like I said, they match the different columns on our board. On the first question, it's going to be the name. Now, this is an important aspect to note because the name on the form matches the name of the item. So name here, okay? If you do not have a name on the form, so if I were to submit the form without having to input a name, then the name of the item when it's created will be, I think it's like submitted from form or created from form. We can demonstrate it later on in this video, but just be mindful of that, because what you will end up having is every single item name will be submitted from form, submitted from form, submitted from form, and it might become more difficult to track what you are actually looking to include or not include, or just see what's going on those submissions. So just be mindful of that. You might have in this instance, please provide your full name. So you can change the name of the questions on the form, and that does not update the name of the actual column inside of Monday.com. You can change that setting, but by standard, it should not. So please provide your full name. You can add a description just like you could to the name of the survey or the description of the survey. And then you will obviously, this in this instance is a text column. They will then write in what their name is. You would hope anyway, right? We then have question settings and some logic. So I'll just go through the settings first. So you can pre-fill the value based on the source, or like the URL parameter if you're tracking that, or the account. This does get slightly more complicated, the account being the account name of the person that you're sending it to, or you can, and then you define the field. So the source being the account, and then the field, as you can see here. I probably wouldn't have this on. That's a rare use case. In most instances, you're not going to have them pre-fill a value on the project form or on any form. You can test this out, however, but yeah, I would just leave that unselected for the time being. Hide question. So if we don't want this question to be visible on the form, to the end user, then we can hide it, or we can make it required, meaning that they must provide information or answer this particular question in order to submit the form. Obviously, you can't have both. You can't both hide it and have it required. But if it's hidden, especially for the name, like I was talking about earlier, it would just say submitted from form. So I would make sure that you at least have this on. And for the name, I would probably have this required as well. So then we have person. Now, person is an internal selection. You can, I think they've got like a beta version of like being able to select a person from a form. In most instances, you would just delete the question, or you can restrict the form. You don't need to have it visible. So you go question settings and just hide it. So that's quite easy. That obviously relates to this column here, the person question. We then have the status column. Now you have obviously your status options that are visible. Some of them, if you don't want to have as an option, you can hide them. So as you can see, I've got new, active, completed, and cancelled. I can hide this one if I want to. So that means that they would only be able to see, the end user would only be able to see active, completed, or cancel/postponed. I can also add options, and I can change the naming of the options that are not being used on the actual board. You can see that this is gray and this is open to change. That is the reason why. Obviously, just be mindful though, if I change this to completed -demo, that will also update on this side as well, as you can see here. So if you're changing the name on the front end, like stuff like that, then it's going to change the name on the back end of the system as well. So just be mindful. That's why that's grayed out, is because it's being used. We've then got question settings. So we can show options in a drop down, show options horizontally, or show options in a list. This is unique to the status. I think it might be unique to a drop down column as well, or status column. And then you show options in order, alphabetical, randomized. You've got the pre-fill value thing again, if you want to test that out. And then you can either hide the question or you can make it required, either or, one of those two things. Okay. We then have phases. So this is a connection column between this board and this board here. So the projects board and the phases board. You can see the boards drop down will be displayed here and the items drop down will be displayed here. This is again where Superforms probably has superiority over the Monday.com forms when it comes to creating connections and things like that. So this is probably something that I would just look to use Superforms for. You can see it's also in beta and is also a trial. They are saying that they may require payment in the future, which is a weird thing that Monday.com does. We've then got project type. This is just another status column. One thing I didn't mention on the previous status column was logic. Okay, so if I go to this status column here and select logic and use the drop down menu, there's no options. So it says add a single select, multi-select, or Boolean question before this one to set up logic. As you can see, this project type is below, in order on the form, the status column. So I can use logic here, and the only status that I can use within the logic is the one above. Or if you've got multiple status columns above it, then it will show you all of the status columns that are above, or drop downs. So this means that show this question if, and then status is equal to, let's say, completed. So that means that this particular question is only going to be shown if the end user selects the completed option at this status here, and then obviously this would populate. Otherwise, it just won't show on the form. You've got question settings. Again, I would make this required. This would obviously only be required if they selected the completed status. And you can add options, change options, and then you've got the logic available here. This is actually a change to the old logic, and I'm not sure if I prefer it or not. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I'm not too sure. It does give us a lot more flexibility. We've also got timeline, so they can go ahead and submit a timeline. So we can again hide question or make it required. And there is some logic here. Again, any logic below either a drop down, a Boolean, or a status means that you can hide or show different columns. So all of these columns underneath can be logic applied to them. So it's not just obviously a status column. So we would say that if the status or the, let's say the project type is equal to BB, then we want to know the timeline. And then we would make that required, but only if the project type is equal to BB. We've then got files. Let's say I don't want them to be able to upload files. I would just hide this question, and then the date created, which is a date column as well as the date completed. We've got today as default, include the time. So if we want to include the time, that means that in order to submit the date, they must also include the time. We can make it required. We can also set today as default date if you wanted to do that or not. And let's say on the date completed, we just wanted to hide the question. So now we've got all of the questions for our form set up. Hopefully that makes sense. There are going to be variables in the question settings dependent on the column type. So just bear that in mind. And then what I can do, which is nice, is just untick show hidden content. So it condenses the form down to everything that I've just added that is actually going to be visible to the end user, removes a lot of the clutter, as you can see here. You've also got this thank you page. If you want to have it, you can change, well, you can't, I don't think you get rid of it actually. You can change the thank you to, let's say, something else. You can add a description, you can hide or show the image if you want to. So once they've completed the submission, it just takes them to the thank you page. So that's pretty much everything on here. You can drag and drop other questions. You can see how they would position up here. Because of the logic that we've set up, that can't be done. But let's say I wanted to put the date created at the top. You can see that you can reposition them using the left hand side option here, as opposed to, or at least you used to be able to drag and drop them from here, but evidently that's not possible anymore. So the only way to reposition the questions on the form is using this function on the left hand side here. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about the kind of basic setup of form functionality within monday.com in terms of just like questions and things like that. If I hit preview now, this will open up a new tab and I'll be able to see all of the questions. As you can see here, there are only 3. If I set that as completed, it shows me my project type. Select BB, it shows me my timeline. You can obviously change the name and stuff like that as well. If I now head back to my projects and go back to the form that we're working on, there's a few other things that I want to show you. So we've also got design functionality within monday.com. Now, I will warn you, it's not the best, right? It's okay. There's not an enormous amount of flexibility. So on the right hand side, you've got a few different options. Firstly, you've got format. So you can select whether it's one question at a time or if it's all of the questions on one form. So this emulates quite similarly to a platform called Typeform, if you're not familiar with it. And you can see how it would be one question, then you press next, and then the next question, then you press next, and you submit one question. I'm probably just going to leave it like this for the time being. Then we've got alignment. So where exactly is this form positioned on the page? So if I open this up in my preview, would it sit on the left? Would it sit in the middle? Or would it sit on the right? Again, this is not crazy customization. You've then got color theme. So you can select the primary color, which would be, let's say, the button and other bits and pieces. You've then got the text color. If you want a different text color, you can do. Why you would want to, well, obviously you can try and keep it on brand as much as you possibly can, but you get the idea here on what's possible. You can obviously add custom colors as well if you would like to. So I've added that. That's the black button. And then let's say I change the text color to a dark red, or that's, I mean, they're not great options, are they? They're very faint, but you get the idea. You can mess around with this. I'll leave it like that. We've then got the background. So if you want to have the background as a different color, you can do. So that's the background to the form, not the actual form itself, but the background around the form. Yeah, I know, a bit odd. So I can use my custom colors if I want to, but I don't think I would. So I'll leave it as that. And then alternatively, if you want to have the background as an image, you can do. So monday.com kindly provided some very basic default images. You can also upload your own background images if you would like to. It's entirely up to you, but there is that option if you want to. So the background and the color theme, you have some options. We've got the logo. So the logo sits right above, and I think I mentioned that at the very beginning of this video. You can add a logo. You just upload it to monday.com, and then that would sit at the very top of the form. You can also do that here as well. We've got a logo alternative text. So if the logo can't load, then you can put text instead. So I might put CRM Crew as an example. Then got header alignment. So align with form, left, center, or right. I quite like it in center, but again, align with form, whatever, you know, these are just basic options. And then we've got the logo size. So dependent on the file size, you might want to tweak how the logo looks, because I know you upload it and then it always looks a bit weird, and then you upload it to another platform and it looks entirely different. So you might have to mess around with your logo size here. And then we've got font. So we don't have an enormous number of font options. We have some basics. Unfortunately, if you're using a brand font that's not on that list, there's not really much you can do about it. That's just how it's going to be. You can't upload your own fonts to monday.com, sadly, but you do have a couple of options. And then you've got text direction, right to left or left to right, probably more suitable for other countries, I think. Yeah, I think that's right. Other countries, I think I'm right in saying read from one way to another, the other way around to how I would read it. God, general knowledge. Yeah, I'm better at Monday.com. Not great on general knowledge. We've got progress bar, so you can click at the top progress bar here. Why that might be more useful, probably not as applicable for the list, but if you're changing the format to this one, then the progress bar might make a bit more sense, because then it's one question at a time. Again, very similar to something that Typeform does. You can untick the Monday.com branding. In fact, I would strongly recommend unticking the Typeform branding. So you don't really want their branding to be present on your form, especially if you're sending this externally. So just something to be mindful of. And then this is kind of, this beautifully designed form that I've walked you through. Hopefully you can come up with a better design than this. But then finally, once you've gone through all of this stuff, then you want to look at your settings. So a few different options. I'm going to run through them as quickly as I can. First and foremost, submit multiple forms. So do you want to allow submitters to make multiple entries of the same form? It'd be impossible to track if it's external, but if you shared this form internally, then you would be able to tick yes or no, and you can just turn that on or off. Save as draft. Allow submitters to save and share their draft for later completion. So if there are a ton of questions on your form and they might have to come back to the form, then you can press save as draft, and what will happen is they have a button that says save as draft, and then I think they can then go back to it. They can. I'm trying to think how they go back to it at a later date. They might get a link or something, but it will save it nonetheless. So even if you open it up, the questions that you submitted will still be there. We've got anonymous form. Keep answers of submitters anonymous. Again, this is only really applicable if you're sharing this form internally as opposed to externally. So then it won't show who submitted it internally when they're logged into their Monday.com account. You've got reCAPTCHA. So if you want to make sure no bots are answering the form, you can do. Again, whether you choose to do that or not is entirely up to you. I can tell you now, the probability of me completing a form with reCAPTCHA, unless I absolutely have to, is very, very low. Because it is such a pain. Response limit the amount of responses you receive. So if you're doing a survey, for example, I don't know, or let's say a survey, and you only want 10 people to submit from the survey. Once the form has received 10 submissions, then the form link will essentially close. It will just say it's received the maximum amount. We've also got schedule a close date. So if you want your form to close after a certain date, you can do. So you can see here that I can, let's say, at the end of the month, I want this form to stop. So I only want submissions until the end of this particular till we reach this date, and then I don't want any form submissions. Again, that might be survey, that might be a promotion that you're running, things like that. We've got hide branding that we'd already ticked on the design page, but you can make sure you've ticked it, double check you've ticked it if you want to. And then we've got form language, so obviously the language that is being used on the form. And then after the submission, we have a few different options here. So allow submitters to view and download their submissions. So if you want to tick that, they can then download the answers that they've given. You can also then allow them to change the responses that they've made. If once they've submitted it, they can then read through it and then make changes to the submission. So it'll take them to a page where they can see all of their answers, then they can edit their answers. That would obviously then update inside of the Monday.com system as well. They'll only have the opportunity to do that immediately after they submitted the form, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, I think it makes sense. So they'll only have that window, otherwise it's gone. Again, this is where super forms might be a more preferable option if this is kind of something that you're looking to achieve, because it gives you more flexibility. And then alternatively, you can just redirect them. So send users to a different page after submission. So if it's a form completion, a lead form, for example, you could then redirect them to like a thank you page video explaining everything they need to know before the call, as an example. Just before I go on to form tags, I've just checked the main table on here. With response editing, responses can be changed after being submitted. What's happened is a new column's been created called a submission link, which I suspect means that if they submitted via the form, it creates a submission link. This submission link can then be referred to at a later date to make updates to what they've submitted, response editing. That is actually quite interesting. So if you allow viewing, allow submitters to view and download their submission, file, signature, and update questions are not fully supported yet. Okay, whatever. But then the response editing, so if they want to edit it, it seems as if I am backtracking, they can actually edit it after the fact, so after they've submitted it, subject to them having the submission link, which you could automatically have sent over to them. If they're submitting an email or a phone number, you could just create an automation, but they would obviously need the submission link in order to make changes. But that's quite cool. So just as a little update there. Or you could do the redirect URL. But it seems when I turned this on, I think it was the response editing, it automatically created that column, which I wasn't aware was possible. So that's a massive improvement by Monday.com, and maybe negates their need for Superforms to an extent. So yeah, Superforms, by the way, is the most popular app on the app marketplace within Monday.com. It does what it says on the tin. It is super version of the Monday.com forms, allows you to do an enormous amount more than Monday.com does within their forms system. Moving on, we have form tags. So you can add tags to a link so you can track like campaigns. It's easy to track what's going on, where the lead, let's say lead source, you can track your lead source by using the tags. And then we have board related information. So include name, question, inform. That was kind of what I was talking about at the very beginning of this video, how you would need to use the name question. You can include update section inform. So if you're not familiar, you obviously have updates within Monday.com. So I can write an update on the right hand side here about that particular item. You can, if you would like to, include that in the form so they can write updates. Entirely up to you. You can sync the questions and column titles. Now, this is what I spoke about as well earlier in the video. The name of the form question can be different to the name of the column within Monday.com. If you tick sync questions and column titles, that means that if I make a change to the name of the column, it's going to update on the form, but also vice versa. So if I change the name of this particular column from status to please select which status you prefer, that will then update the column name on here. So I would suggest keeping this unticked unless for whatever reason you need to have that on. So we then have allow creating items via form. So add option in main board to create new items via the form. It's kind of, I mean, a weird setting, to be honest with you. Essentially means that you can allow creating items via the form, which you would allow anyway when a new item's created, but I guess you could just have that ticked. That's it. I'm on a level with you. I actually don't know what that means, and very, very odd. But you then select the group the new answers will go to. So when a form submission is created, which group does the data populate in, and those groups are represented by the groups on your board here. So yeah, that is, you can obviously got all of the different group options, so that's entirely up to you, but this works either way. So if you've got this selected or unselected, it still would populate in a group. Anyway, that's a bit of a weird allow creating items via form. Anyway, I don't know. I'll hold my hands up and say I do not know. Right, I've just come back to the functionality of the pre-fill value just to review it, because that other thing that happened earlier in the video that impressed me, I wanted to see how useful this was. So the source is the account. So the account being I believe your my login. So my login to Monday.com is the account that it would pre-fill a value from. And then we can select the field at which it's going to pull from. So this is all of the data that could be associated with my Monday.com login account. Okay. Name, email, title, phone, first name, last name, location, time zone, and manager name. So as opposed to me having to enter in my name as an example, if I hit preview, it knows that I'm logged into my Monday.com account, and then it's automatically populated my name. If we change this as an example to email, it's going to know my email address that's associated with my Monday.com account, and it's going to pre-fill that information. Okay. So that's what pre-fill value means. It's obviously only going to work if you are logged into your Monday.com account. The alternative is you have a URL parameter, and then that URL parameter is tracked from a previous step in like a funnel process. Let's say Calendly as an example, and then would pre-fill here. That's actually quite cool as well. So I've learned a couple of things whilst teaching, which is quite interesting. But I still don't have a clue what this allow creating items via form. Item is when you create a record. I still don't know what that means, but hopefully that pre-fill value thing makes sense to you. But again, it's only really going to work if you're sharing this form with other people that have got a Monday.com account. It could be any Monday.com account, I think. So it doesn't necessarily need to be associated with your like CRM crew account or your business account. But as long as they have a Monday.com license, then it would work. Again, don't quote me on that. But now we've completed everything. We've gone through our edit, we've gone through our design, we've gone through our settings. Let's go to preview form. Let's complete a submission. So we'll go completed, project type BB, timeline. Let's just put some random data in here, and then date created. And then we just hit submit. You can see my branding is fantastic. This is obviously the thank you screen saying that that form has now been submitted. If I go to my main table, you can see here that that's been automatically added and the data has automatically pulled through. That is forms inside Monday.com. Hopefully this video has been helpful. If you've got any questions, comment below. I'll try my best to get back to you. I'm not making any promises. However, if you ask a fantastic question, can't promise either, I may make a video on YouTube answering the question if there's enough detail, if there's enough context, and if there's enough meat on the bone for it to make sense. If you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link below. We would love to help. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.